to get connected, so if you are just joining us, hang tight, and we will be started soon. Thank you. Hi everyone, this is Abra from CLPHA. We are just waiting for a couple more folks to get connected, and then we will begin the webinar. So in the meantime, everyone should be on mute, but you can also place your phone on mute as a double precaution to minimize some of that background noise that can be distracting. If you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to send either a public chat in the main chat section on the bottom left of the screen, or a private chat to either myself or Micah O'Brien. You can also send an email to abra, A-B-R-A, @clpha.org if you need some troubleshooting technical assistance. Again, we'll be getting started shortly. Thank you. Okay, this is Abra from CLPHA. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Appreciate everyone's patience. Very excited about today's webinar. We are going to be talking about different post-secondary initiatives happening both at the federal level and on the ground. We have really recently been ramping up our efforts in this area, and we're really pleased to be able to have both of the presenters that we have this morning, or this afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. So again, just some quick sort of technical specs. If you haven't joined us, this is our new webinar software. It's called ClickMeeting. Hopefully it was pretty easy for you all to register and or sign in today. The main things that you need to worry about, there is a chat box in the bottom, primarily left hand of the screen. That's where you can type any questions you might have for the presenters. We'll be doing that at the very end, but feel free to type them at any time, as well as if you're having any sort of technical difficulties or other issues. You can also feel free to send a private chat to either myself or Micah O'Brien, who I will let introduce herself to you in just a moment. But if you'd like to send either of us a private chat, you can go ahead and click on our name, and then you should see an option to send us a private chat. You are also welcome. I'll keep an eye on my email. That's abra, A-B-R-A, @clafa.org, if you need to get a hold of us that way. So I think I will go ahead and let Micah introduce herself, and she will tell you anything that I've forgotten to say about ClickMeeting. But I will also mention that we are recording this, so if you want to review after or share with colleagues, that will certainly be an option. Micah?
Hi, this is Micah. I feel like I may have met many of you or introduced myself to many of you, but I joined CLPHA in June as a one-year fellow, helping out Abra and Steve with Housing Is happenings. So really excited to be here. I think you covered mostly everything with the tech stuff, Abra, but if you run into any difficulties, of course, feel free to reach out. We're going to be pulling up slides after we finish up this poll, and you all will remain on mute for the duration of the webinar, so all your questions will come through the written chat box. But yeah, I think that's about it.
Great. Thanks so much, Micah. So that was an excellent segue. Before we turn it over to our first presenter, we just wanted to do a quick poll with you all to get a sense of who might be on today's webinar. So everyone should be seeing some questions in front of you. There are 3 questions, yep, so make sure you scroll down. Please go ahead and click those, and then at the bottom you can hit send votes. So please take a moment right now to let us know what sector you're from, if you are engaging in any of the following activities, and what you might hope to learn from today's webinar.
Okay, so it looks like mostly everyone has answered the survey, so I'm just going to end voting to share the results with you so everyone can see. Looks like we have mostly housers on the line, people interested in collecting post-secondary data or already doing that, engaging in post-secondary activities, working with a community college, and then hoping to take away peer sharing with other communities, government efforts in this area, and on-the-ground activities to implement in your communities.
Great. Thanks so much, Micah, and thanks to everyone for filling that out. So it looks like for our presenters that we don't have too many folks who feel like they're at the very beginning of this and don't know where to start. So that's great that we have a more advanced group with us today. I think with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter. So we will be hearing from Calvin Johnson. He is with the Policy Development and Research Department at HUD. We have worked with Calvin for a number of years now. Some of you may remember he or someone else from his team presented a couple of years ago on some of the initial data collection that was happening around the federal student financial aid. But I will let Calvin introduce himself and the work further, and then he will be going into some of the past efforts in this area as well as what's currently happening over at HUD. Calvin?
Great, thank you, Abra. I'm Calvin Johnson. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Office of Research Evaluation and Monitoring within PD&R at HUD. The following presentation is an update of FAFSA experiments that we have undertaken over the past several years with the Office of Evaluation Sciences at GSA and the Office of Federal Student Aid, FSA, at the U.S. Department of Education. I want to start off by saying that this work would not be possible without HUD and the Department of Education's interest in promoting post-secondary education among low-income families. What I'd like to do is just kind of provide an update, but start off by giving an overview and then a statement of the challenges, and then walk you through each of the three phases that we have undertaken, with the third phase being something that we have underway now. So a quick overview. We know that post-secondary education and economic self-sufficiency go hand in hand. There's a high correlation between the two. We also know that HUD, or that you all should know, that HUD assists more than 2 million residents ages 17 to 34. And we also have the ability to send information directly to these residents. We know where they live, and usually if we send mail in partnership with the Housing Authority, the mail gets open. Given our annual performance tracking measures of FAFSA submission, we decided to focus our efforts, or to focus our experimental efforts on residents ages 17 to 24. And the reason we did that is because our students take longer to complete, and so we do find that many of students living in assisted housing are actually still in school at age 25 and beyond, but we see that the largest group is between the ages of 17 and 24. So let's speak about FAFSA completion and some of the challenges that folks may face. So the first thing is that we know that students don't necessarily complete FAFSA because they think that college is just too expensive. They don't fully understand what they're eligible for, and with all of the, with all of the deadlines, it's really hard for them to keep track. So we set out to use communication to influence their FAFSA completing behavior. And there's an evidence out there that you can get, or you can increase the rate of completion by just communicating in a very deliberate way. And specifically, we've been working with GSA and their behavioral scientists, or folk who really understand behavioral economics, to figure out how best to communicate with these residents. So let's talk about phase one. So I'm going to actually refer to these experiments as phase 1, 2, and 3. The slides will give you a sense of where we are with them. So for phase 1, we were looking at the 2016-2017 academic year. And specifically, what we wanted to do here is we wanted to send out mailers to all HCV, so Housing Choice Voucher youth, between the ages of 17 and 20. And we did this experimental design where we specifically wanted to determine whether we could test the differences between those youth that receive messages. We also wanted to test whether the messenger mattered, and then the format of message. And so because we have over 222,000 youth and 203 households, it gave us plenty of data. So this next slide, you'll see exactly how we basically assigned across the format that we communicated with them, so those are the columns, so it's letter and paper FAFSA included, and then postcard/infograph. The messenger are the rows, so we have the previous First Lady using a personalized message, the previous First Lady using FSA's message, and then we had FSA's message. And then all 45,000 give us a sense of whether receiving any message mattered. So that's pretty much what you have here. So it provides you the three questions and how we went about answering the three questions. So what did we find? Well, there was no significant effect of sending mailings on the rate of FAFSA completion. More specifically, 22% of individuals who were sent some kind or any kind of mailing completed FAFSA, which is only 0.30 percentage point higher than the rate of the control group, which was 21.7%. The most effective sender, however, was the First Lady using her personalized message. With 22.4% of FAFSA completions for the group that received her personal message, which is 0.65 percentage point higher than the control group. When we look at the most effective format, the format that had the letter with the FAFSA included was the most effective format. Again, at 22.4%, which is 0.69% higher than the control group. Now, while there was no significant finding, and I don't want to hedge at all, the fact that we're learning that the messenger and the format could potentially matter is really important. And I don't want to play around with the language, but the messenger, that is the First Lady as a messenger, and the format that includes the paper FAFSA, those would be what folk would call marginally statistically significant. Again, I don't want to hedge, but I think that gives us a signal that there is some learning still to be done there. So now we move to phase two. In phase two, we're looking at the 2017-2018 academic year. And specifically, we worked with CLPHA and we tried to identify 5 housing authorities that would be willing to partner with us to try light touch communication to housing authorities and their residents to see whether we could increase FAFSA completions. After identifying 5, 3 actually agreed to move forward with this. That was NYCHA, the Seattle Housing Authority, and the King County Housing Authority. And I have to say right up front, NYCHA, if you're on the phone, Seattle, King County, I'm sorry, these are very preliminary data. We haven't discussed them with you. So I want everyone on the phone to just take this as very preliminary, but thought that it was important to at least have a discussion on the phone with where we are, and where we are is kind of starting to play around with the data, but very preliminary. So with NYCHA, we had the ability, because of the size of NYCHA, we had the ability to implement an experimental design. And specifically, we were looking at public housing only for residents aged 17 to 24. They were randomly assigned to be sent a series of communication, or were selected to be in the control group. And with NYCHA, we also had the ability to do mailings and robocalls. In Seattle and King County, we used a quasi-experimental design, a pretty neat approach that we're testing out still, where instead of just sending it to public housing, we send it to all of their assisted residents ages 17 to 24. And we're trying it out with 2 letters. And the first letter will come from the CEO or chair of the housing authority. And then the second letter would also come from the chair, but would focus on kind of Pell and what do you need to do to be eligible for Pell. So let's go through them quickly and talk about NYCHA. So with NYCHA, we wanted to increase intensity. So the reason we have so many communication is to see whether intensity mattered, and we wanted to look at public housing to see whether we could target public housing, especially given some of the address challenges we had. So The good thing about that is that we have all of the addresses, we have 98% coverage for phone numbers for the household, and we have 45% coverage of emails. But we're uncertain as to the characteristics of the household with the emails. So we randomly assign roughly 40,000 households with roughly 50,000 unique individuals, ages 17 to 24. And we blocked at household income and development that they live in and whether or not they had an email. We try to make certain that we had a representative sample or a balanced sample, as balanced as we could. And again, the households were sent 4 letters, 3 emails, and 1 robocall. The first letter and email was from the Housing Authority, simply stating what are the steps to start a FAFSA online. The robocall basically encouraged folks to complete FAFSA, or they told folks what they needed to do to complete FAFSA and to be eligible for federal student aid. The second letter and email was all Pell focused, specifically looking at the amount compared to CUNY tuition. So it would tell them how much CUNY tuition was for a 2-year college, for a 4-year college, and then it would show them what they could potentially be eligible for in terms of a Pell Grant. The postcard and email, basically towards the end of the experiment, said that it wasn't too late, you still have time to fill it out, and then the final letter was meant to dispel or bust myths. So there are a lot of myths out there. So what did we find? We found no significant change in FAFSA completion or enrollment. Specifically, what we found is that the point estimates in 2018 are slightly higher than in 2017. And so we're learning about timing. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's just that these cycles run 18 months, and so we're learning about how best to time the information delivery. And so in 2017, if you look at the control group, their FAFSA completion rate was 35%, and for the treatment group, it was 35.2%. Enrollment rate were 32.5% for the control and 32.7% for the treatment group. So that's in 2017. If we move to 2018, the FAFSA completion rate was 25.4 for the control group and 25.7 for the treatment group. And then enrollment was 23.8% in 18 for the control group and 24.3% for the treatment group. Again, none of these findings were statistically significant. But again, we're learning, so this is the process of learning for us. So we turn to Seattle and King County. Again, we used a non-experimental design. This complements the experimental design component in NYCHA. We looked at 2 letters that mirrored the first 2 letters within the NYCHA pilot, specifically general information from the CEO, and then the second letter was about Pell Grants and the average within the locality. Okay, I'm having an internet connection issue. Oops. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can still hear you.
I lost my internet connection here in the office.
Oh, if you have your slides in front of you in another way,
I do have them.
So if you want to just say next slide, please, we can advance them for you.
Okay, I just need to have them in my hand. Give me a few seconds. Here they are. So great. So, and again, we basically sent the communication to everyone age 17 to 24, both in public housing and housing choice voucher program. Again, these numbers are very preliminary. The other thing that I just want to say here is that we used a synthetic sample, so we're looking for a statistically matched group of housing authorities to Seattle and King County. All right, next slide, please. It should be the slide that says preliminary results. Is that right?
Yep.
Excellent. Great. So here's what we found. There were estimates of positive effects in Seattle in both 2017 and 18, and estimates of small positive effects in King County in 2018, but the estimates were very noisy and not statistically significant. So walk through this one as well. So in Seattle in 2017, the control group submission rates were 49.7 compared to 52.7 for the treatment group. In King County, it was 42.6% submitted compared to 42% for the treatment group in 2017. In 2018, we see a difference there of about 6.4 percentage point in terms of FAFSA submission for Seattle in 18, and we see a 3.7 percentage point difference in favor of the treatment group for King County in 2018. Again, these results are very preliminary. Once we have better estimates, we'll be able to sit down and have more like a more thorough discussion with the housing authorities about what this is saying. But thought that it was helpful to kind of share with folk on the phone who've been tracking this, just where we are. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk about FAFSA Experiment Phase 3. Now, Phase 3 is also affectionately known as SOAR. SOAR stands for Student and Opportunities and Achievement equals Results. It's a demonstration program. I think we're on slide 17. It's a demonstration program reflecting the department, that is HUD's commitment to expand educational services to youth living in HUD-assisted housing. And we have 9 grantees, so 9 housing authorities receive a grant to hire and deploy educational navigators to work with youth ages 15 to 20. And I will say the one thing that we're hearing is that we should have probably started earlier in terms of maybe starting at age 13. But we've done site visits to all 9 sites and have nothing but really promising things going. We observe a lot of promising things going on the ground. Next slide, please. So the study design is quasi-experimental for 4 of the grantees. They're the smaller grantees, and we have experimental designs for the larger grantees. The experimental design is pretty interesting because we get to do random assignment at the development or AMP level, which allow us still to draw causal inferences about the impact of the intervention. That is, does having a navigator increase the rate of submission and college enrollment over business as usual? Now, business as usual means that students get whatever services they're already receiving. So whatever students would typically get in their community, they get that. But what does the value of having a navigator working with families and young people one-on-one in many cases, what's the additional value of that? Next slide, please. The study design basically has 2 components to it. We have the experimental design. We have the quasi-experimental design for the smaller areas. What we're trying to find out in terms of the implementation study that we just completed this past summer, we're trying to learn about their challenges, both from what the residents are facing and planning for post-secondary, and surprisingly, we're finding out that it's not only the resident, meaning the young people and their parents, but also the people who are charged with supporting the child. So whether it's the counselor at school or a teacher at school or the coach, we're learning about the challenges that they're facing as well. We'll also be learning about the challenges faced by PHAs in implementing SOAR, and we get to provide a more detailed understanding of local variations in program implementation. And I can pretty much say that there is a lot of variety in how the programs are being implemented, and they all are tailored to meet the demands or the needs of their community. The current grant cycle runs through April. I'm assuming, I think there has been some signaling that there might be an extension of that. I'm not quite certain, but you all will be the first to know. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. The last slide, thank you all, and hope that this was informative.
Great. Thanks so much, Calvin. So I know we had a couple questions in the chat box. So again, a reminder, we're going to hold off on all questions until after both presentations, but feel free to type questions at any time. So if you want to know more about what Calvin was just talking about, go ahead and type those questions in the bottom left-hand chat screen. So with that, I'm going to go ahead, Micah, if you want to pull up the next slide, and introduce our next presenter. Cassandra Brooks is with the Chicago Housing Authority. Those of you on the webinar today, I know a couple of you are new, but for the rest of you, you should be very familiar with Cassie. She's been a fantastic advocate for this work and partner with CLPHA's Housing Is initiative. So she's going to be talking a little bit more about some of the work that CHA has been focused on the ground for the Housing Authority. And I will let Cassie say more.
Great. Thanks, guys. So yep, as Abra said, my name is Cassie Brooks. I've been working at the Chicago Housing Authority for the past 8 years, and for the past 4 years in my, or almost 5 years now, in my role as our education specialist. So happy to talk further offline as well if you have questions about any of these programs. I'm just going to give a kind of a high flyover of 2 of our main college aid programs, and then also the counseling support that we've been developing as an offshoot of those aid programs as we've recognized more of the needs for our residents. So first, I definitely wanted to give a flyover of some of the what we've learned about our resident population and their interactions with the college environment. So this is some of the data that our research team has been able to pull, but we also do use the National Student Clearinghouse to be able to understand the enrollment history of residents and through some of our data partnerships. So in short, as you can kind of see through reading these stats, our residents do interact with college, however, have a difficulty in completion. So 1 in 10 actually complete a degree, and we know that when we look at what it takes to be a graduate, that it often takes 2 institutions to get there, and that there often also is a gap in enrollment for individuals pursuing college. So we really see these as some of the key, making the case for why we as a PHA should be engaged in college support. So since 2013, the education work has been a part of CHA's history. However, there have definitely been some more strategic investments in the past 5 years. We've added education staff. For the past 5 years, we've run a scholarship program where we've awarded $1.2 million in awards. We've also had a partnership with our city colleges for 10 years. Specifically in the last 5 years, we've enrolled 2,100 students in our partnership program, which I'll go into a bit further. By providing these awards, and this grant aid, we've been able to use that to leverage support for college counseling. So we are one of the sites that Calvin mentioned that is receiving support from HUD to do one-on-one counseling through SOAR. We also are happy to share that we have just received, or our partners, 1 Million Degrees has just received $500,000 to extend their program to our residents through the Kresge Foundation. We also have a pair of events that are sort of strategically placed in the college pipeline as far as when things can get a bit tenuous. So that is we have a trunk party in August, and then we do a winter check-in event in January. Further, have done a lot of data partnerships and are really focused on engaging locally and nationally on education issues for low-income individuals. So as I mentioned, we have 2 grant aid programs. One is a traditional scholarship program. We provide 220 awards annually, so 200 at the $1,000 level and 20 at the $2,500 level. Students apply once a year between January and May, and then awards are issued in the fall. Those checks are sent directly to the school, and students can reapply each year. However, we do not guarantee year-over-year support. We ask the students to show annually that they've been able to maintain enrollment and maintain their college success against a new applicant pool. And then our other program is the Partners in Education program, and this provides last dollar support to attend City College of Chicago. So this is just with City Colleges of Chicago. You can't use a scholarship at City Colleges because we have this central program. And through that program, we cover tuition, books, and fees after financial aid is applied and to meet any unmet costs. And this support is available year-round. We do include the summer semester. which I'll get into as being an important offering as well. So just as an overview for the scholarship, as I mentioned, it's been 5 years running. So we've been able to support 1,100 awards. Most of the students use those awards at a four-year school. And we do know that through our enrollment data that the students that receive support, 80% of them have remained enrolled or have graduated, and that the scholarship awardees are able to maintain double the rate of academic involvement, either staying enrolled or having graduated, as those without CHA support. Next, with our Partners in Education program. So this program started 10 years ago, as I mentioned. It was actually a workforce development program, so it was focused heavily on getting certificates to CHA residents and enrolling them in certificate programs. So you can see this graph down here on the bottom left that shows how many awards have been conferred by year as we've grown this program. So about 6 years ago is when we opened it up to any program that City Colleges offered, including associate's degree support. And since that time, we've seen a huge jump in enrollment towards the associate's degree. So currently now, 70% who enroll do so in an associate's degree program. We're seeing that happen across the board, both for public housing residents and voucher holders. And then using that associate's degree to continue on. We do have data from City Colleges that our residents are performing at the same level, or in some cases slightly better than standard City Colleges student, and that they are transferring at the same rate, and in some years even a little better. So you can see that the graph, the program's been growing over the past, over each year. It's a little deceptive in this chart because this chart is awards conferred, and so as we've obviously grown our associate's degrees, since they take longer to get, we are actually growing the enrollment in the program, but the degrees conferred annually has dropped slightly, but that's because so many of the students are now doing associate's degrees. As I mentioned, we do allow a summer semester. I think that's pretty key for those of you who are working in the field. You may know this, but in summer semester to get Pell eligibility at least requires 3 classes, and usually the summer semester is pretty limited, or for us at City Colleges, it's 8 weeks long. So we want to be able to provide support so students can maintain enrollment in academic community year-round, and we want them, especially for students that are away at college elsewhere, to recognize that City Colleges is still available to them and can still be a support in their education, particularly as we have some students need to stop out, take a semester off from their 4-year institution because of family needs, health needs at home. And so we really see the summer semester as a great option, but also a really strategic intervention to help students get to completion. So I can't really emphasize that enough. The cost per credit hour is super low at our city colleges or our community colleges, but particularly in the summer, the idea of sort of keeping that momentum for students year-round has been very key, or even to remediate against gaps, because we know it's taking longer for college students to complete their 4-year degree, in many cases 5 or 6 years. So by maximizing that summertime, we're getting students to graduation on time and therefore with less debt. By building these 2 programs, they're actually meeting 2 very different profiles of students. So our CHA scholarship is serving the average age of a CHA scholarship awardee is 23. They're more often than not a traditional student. They're less likely to be the head of household. They're often the dependent in the household. And we are significantly female in terms of our college enrollment overall, but specifically with both of these programs. And then with the Partners in Education program, that's our City Colleges program, we're seeing our heads of households come back to school. So the average age is 35. Most have attended college previously, and the gap between when they were last in college and them joining us in Partners in Education is about 5 years. So this is a really, again, a strategic opportunity for an adult who maybe had young kids and now they're in school. They feel a little more stable and are really looking for the next step to be able to come back to school and get their complete their degree that they weren't able to finish because life got in the way earlier. And then overwhelmingly, most are the head of household and most are female. And even when you look at our population, the Partners in Education students within the context of City Colleges overall, we're seeing some of the same things. Our students are older. Our students are less likely to be a new student. There's someone who has had some college before but weren't able to continue. So since we've been implementing these grant programs for the scholarship, it's been 5 years. For the City Colleges program, it's been more like 10, but it's really kind of refreshed in these last 5 years. It's obviously important for us to talk about and address funding. We are an MTW agency, which allows us some flexibility in funds. So for some of these grant programs, we are using our CHA's budget to implement these programs, but we do also have funds coming to us from a program called Section 3 here in Chicago, which is a contracting program wherein we receive some support through that. And we also do have a nonprofit affiliate called Springboard to Success, which is helping us to raise private dollars to make these programs possible and consistent. Outside of the grant aid, I think, as I'm sure many on the phone and on the webinar know, once you start offering aid, there will be some greater uptake. We are seeing students, the benefit of giving aid and supporting students with aid is we are able to learn more about them and sort of track their history and their trajectory at a bit of a longer term. It also means that we are being utilized more as a resource. We get lots of phone calls about other needs, including emergency aid, food, internships, and gaps in enrollment. So it's a good opportunity for us to learn more about the need and help to address it. So some key things that we've kind of moved our program to be available to and support, as I mentioned, was that summer classes that consistently came up as a way to make sure students were staying engaged in school year-round, and then really moving to that one-on-one support. As you may remember in that first slide talking about the differences for our students, our graduates have, 75% of our graduates need 2 schools to get there. It has been too cost prohibitive to use one school to complete, or a student had an enrollment gap. So having a counselor support them through that process and that navigation has been very key. We also use, you can see some photos over here to the right. The top one is from our Take Flight event in January. So we schedule those Take Flight events to really be at those key points of insecurity for students. So that one in January is right before students head back in spring semester, and inevitably we do have students reach out to us who say, hey, I'm actually not enrolled in January, and here's why. Can you help me? Can you help me get into the City Colleges program? But we do also structure that January event to be very focused on planning the summer already in January. With internships, we have a number of businesses and internship providers as well as our own CHA internship. And we also do host a headshot photographer, as you can see up there, to help students get LinkedIn ready. So essentially helping our students build out their network, introduce them to individuals that we have relationships with for internships and really the next step in their career. One of the things we've learned to do as well is have our college tours led by enrolled CHA college students. So learn who they are from the scholarship and then inviting them to reconnect with their students. It builds a great community, and it also allows our current college students the time to shine, to really show that they are doing it. They are enrolled in school and are making great strides such that they are an example for our younger high school students. And so as we move forward, I know some of the folks on the line have their own community college partnerships. We find ours really invaluable. It is the lowest cost per credit hour and the most accessible by location for our residents. But even if you can't have a relationship where you're having vouchers or being able to support students directly, definitely would recommend opportunities such as info sessions or having events on your property, posting the enrollment dates, or establishing a single point of contact for the relationship between the community college and the PHA. With our partnership, we are able to share data as students enroll in the program and sign off that that's acceptable, which has helped us a lot to be able to track enrollment gaps and support students getting back in the program. We try to host recognition events. We also are working to have our own little graduate cord for the city colleges specific to our program, again, to highlight what our residents are doing there. And then even if some small funding is available, starting with summer semester or book vouchers, like I said, federal financial aid does cover for us in Chicago the full academic year, and it covers students comprehensively so that they don't have any debt if they are Pell eligible, with the exception of the summertime. And so that might be a good opportunity as well. And then finally, as as we build out these college support programs, I definitely would encourage, even if there's no funding available for your PHA to do some of this work, anything we can do to kind of align ourselves with our colleges, whether that's sharing scholarship information, posting those enrollment dates, or there's a wealth of community orgs and access organizations, inviting them onto your property and opening up opportunities for residents. I think another area that we have continued to grow in and continue to develop our understanding is not only just sharing the FAFSA as much as we can, but further making sure that we are well adept at reading and helping families with those financial aid award letters, and to help unpack them. Because if we're offering $1,000, a $1,000 scholarship, that can only go so far. If we're helping a student find a college fit and match that's sustainable for their long-term to graduation, that's worth tens of thousands of dollars. We definitely at that August event see some financial aid award letters that are pretty troubling, that contain a lot of loan debt, and we want to help families and particularly students find a school that is going to really get them to graduation. Otherwise, just hosting recognition events, publicizing graduations, publicizing resident achievements has been great for us to be able to sort of extend this college-going culture and share out what has happened. So, if there is some funding available, I would say if you could ever start with even just a $500 award, it would help to engage residents. It would also help you to be able to track their trajectory and their history and success. Overall, I'd encourage you to visit our website. We have about 6 different pages related to education all through the CHA.org/education, and that kind of helps families navigate what is available and what we offer. I also am happy to get on the phone with anyone if there's any support I can provide, or if we have more collective learning or there's things that I haven't considered, I'd love to chat further. So thank you.
Thanks so much. That was really a lot of great statistics about what's going on with the residents at CHA and the partnership. So thank you so much. And thank you also for being so willing to connect with other folks. That's definitely a huge part of what we hope to achieve with the working group. So with that, just again a reminder that if you have questions for either Cassie or Calvin, if you can go ahead and type those in the chat box, which is at the bottom of the page, that would be great. I see that we have one already. So Calvin, the Atlanta Housing Authority would like to know, you talked about numbers decreasing in 2018, and they were wondering if there was a theory as to why that might have been.
I'm glad you asked the question. So what we find is that at the macro level, enrollment rates are going down for 2-year, 4-year colleges. FAFSA submission rates going down, and so more folk are deciding to actually enter the job market. And one of the things that I did not talk about is that one of the challenges that we face in terms of FAFSA submission is the long-term outlook for low-income kids, trying to get them to understand and weigh the balances between current employment and like current employment options compared to what they could potentially earn if they go and get a 2-year degree or even a 4-year degree. And so those are, one, we have the macro trend downward, but also, we need to think about strategies for kind of putting information on the table for them. Like if you go into the workplace now, this is your potential lifetime earnings. If you go to a 2-year school, this is your potential lifetime earnings. If you go to 4-year school, this is your potential lifetime earnings. And we can do a better job on that front as well.
Great.
Yeah, this is Cassie. I would also echo that. For even we're seeing that at CHA too, even with our Partners in Education program, students foregoing completion or foregoing, they'll come to an info session but not ultimately enroll, and we're learning that a lot of that is because of job opportunities outplacing and outpacing the idea of going to school for a couple years.
And there was also a question, I believe from Louisville, that Calvin, I think you mentioned that people have attended more than one college, and Christy was wondering if there's data about if that's for-profit institutions versus nonprofit institutions.
Yeah, so we haven't really had an opportunity to kind of explore the data in that way. We're just really happy to be able to link the data, but the FSA data will tell us the types of institutions they've been to and where their transcripts are being sent. It's just that we haven't had an opportunity to kind of explore the data that way. We do, however, know, based on some of the same things you heard in Cassie's presentation, is that our folks take longer to go to school, and sometimes there are breaks in their enrollment, and then many of them are coming back to school as well. And so, I can tell you, based on my site visits to the 9 Project SOAR grantee sites, is that it wasn't uncommon for us to see for-profit entities trying to recruit young people around high schools or being president fairs and things of that nature. But we haven't started to explore the data to see whether there's any issue there.
This is Cassie. I'll just echo that as well. We definitely have, more often than not, when we have a resident come to the Partners in Education program, their prior enrollment and their fear and skepticism is from coming from a for-profit institution or having that be part of their experience. So we definitely see the enrollments, or we definitely see that as a large part of education history and something that we're trying to message around and help avoid and make sure that there is a clearer pathway to our city colleges system where that cost per credit hour is significantly lower and there's a clear path to completion.
Can I just say something? I think it's important. So I went out to a number of the 9 Project SOAR sites, and I learned so much. And I'm not saying this because Cassie's on the line, but I really want to applaud the work that the Chicago Housing Authority is doing. I saw firsthand how their partnership and the way that they're leveraging the resources and the resources that are dedicated for students and just the kind of leadership or the thought leadership that they have around this, I think is really valuable. And perhaps as we move forward and try to flesh that out in the implementation report, I'm hoping that we're going to do what we've learned on site justice. Cassie highlighted a number of things that they are doing in this space, and I just want to say that for those on the phone who are really looking for innovative strategies for addressing this issue, I would encourage you to follow up with Cassie. I was really impressed with the work there, and I was really impressed with work at some of the other sites. And so, stay tuned for the implementation report, and hopefully we do it justice in kind of characterizing the innovative practices that these housing authorities are actually implementing.
Great. That's great to hear. And I guess, Cassie, I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit about, especially sort of in light of the earlier question about, reasons folks might not be matriculating and or the job market, opportunities that aren't necessarily college but might be more workforce development geared or apprenticeship programs. Is that something that CHA has been, really noticing trends with residents or have specific initiatives geared towards?
Yeah, I think that's actually something that we've really noticed with SOAR. So we put out the SOAR program. It's a 2-year grant, and really in that first year we had a lot of students connect that saw themselves as college bound. And now that we've supported them, addressed them, and we're continuing to support them, we're really getting to this second tier of students who don't know that they need college and or haven't really thought about that as their next step. And so that's been a real challenge for our education navigators, trying to think about how best to phrase it. They don't want to have FAFSA workshops because students who are not college bound don't think that the FAFSA is for them. So they've really been trying to be really innovative about how they market those programs to residents and doing things like Map My Future workshops, some are doing for the new year a vision boarding session to try to, again, really open up to not come in with college, but to really open up what, working with a navigator strategically to think about what are your personal next steps, and then weaving in things like our certificate programs, our associate degrees. So not coming in with, a lot of students just have experiences where it's like they've established that college isn't for them, but still trying to connect them to their navigator as just being a resource and a mentor for whatever the next step may be. And also being okay to try something. I think that's one thing that I'm happy about our City College's program and how it's positioned, is that you can try a certificate and see if it works for you, and you won't be in debt after that experience. So that's been another key selling point, is that you don't have to know what you want to be at 18 years old, but you can try something and it won't be a risk by trying.
Great. And just a sort of last reminder to folks with the few minutes that we have left that if you have questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat box.
And I actually have a question that is something that I picked up on when Calvin was speaking, but I think, Cassie, you will probably be able to speak to this as well. Calvin, you mentioned that as you were doing your Project Source site visit, you were noticing that it's important to start maybe even earlier than the age of 15, maybe around 13. I was wondering if you could speak to that and what led you to that conclusion, and then if Cassie, if you're seeing kind of the importance of starting at a young age at CHA, what does that look like, and how you're responding to that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we constantly encounter was just talking to the navigator and the superintendent and the teachers in the classroom and saying that, kids are starting to disappear from the classroom. So what we would consider kids who might not otherwise think the college for them are starting to not show up to school around 8th and 9th grade. And that creating a college-going atmosphere for them needs to start really early, and understanding that probably 6th grade, 7th grade might be a bit too early, but by getting them at middle school or getting them before they leave middle school is perhaps a pretty good strategy for these educators. I was surprised to hear that across a number of sites that by 9th grade, pretty much the dropouts have decided who they are. And many of them are disengaged for any number of reasons. And so the comment that I kept getting was that, hey, look, you can think about age-appropriate activities for a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old so that they understand that there are many more options for them. You don't have to go to a 4-year Ivy League school. You can go to a career school and learn how to be an aeronautic mechanic, which is fairly common at community colleges close to airports. Didn't know it. But in the number of sites, that was fairly common. And there's just so many different certificate programs and majors that kids probably don't realize at such an early age that they could potentially finish high school and enroll in these programs and make a pretty good living. And that's a message that we kept hearing has to be something that these kids hear at younger ages than 15.
Great. So it doesn't look like, folks, last chance if you want to ask another question to go ahead and quickly type that. We are coming up on the close of time here, and I want to be respectful of that. But just while we're waiting to see if there's any final questions, again, want to reiterate thank you to both of you. This is really a great set of presentations, really useful and important data. I'm sure folks will be following up with you, but we really appreciate your time and having your expertise to share. Micah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
So just thanks again. Really interesting stuff coming out of federal level and local level. So great to get that today.
Great. And any final words, either Cassie or Calvin, that you wanted to share with the group?
No, just thank you guys so much for being involved and being interested and putting this in, or I hope by being here and learning more that if you don't already see this as part of the work of a housing agency, I hope you do. So and look forward to continuing to grow it as well. So thanks.
Thank you all.
I'm just seeing one final question about the presentations. We don't typically email the presentations, but what we do is we've recorded today's webinar, and the recording will be posted on housingiS.org in the CLPHA Education Working Group community. We can go ahead and put a link to that in the chat box before we close out, but I can also send around an email with a link to that. But that will be a way for you to both re-see the slides as well as rehear what was discussed today. So I think with that, thank you so much. I hope that everyone has a very happy rest of December and time off if you're taking it. But you can see, yes, right there, Micah has just posted the link to the webinars where you can see all of our past webinar presentations as well. So feel free to click on that, share with colleagues. You do have to be signed in to access that working group community, but accounts are free and should take just moments to register for. Let us know if you have any questions with that. And with that, thank you so much to our presenters and to Micah for the webinars today.
Thanks.